The diner's bell screamed as the door slammed open, shattering the hum of early morning chatter. Maria Alvarez froze, her hand clutching a steaming coffee pot, as Raul, her boss, stormed in, his face a mask of rage. The fluorescent lights flickered, casting jagged shadows across the cracked linoleum floor of El Sabor, a tired, greasy spoon in East Los Angeles. Maria's heart pounded. She knew that look. It was the kind that ended shifts early, or worse, jobs entirely. At 38, with a 12-year-old son counting on her, she couldn't afford to find out what had set him off this time. But the answer was already slinking through the parking lot, its ribs sharp under matted brown fur. Sewell, the stray dog she'd been feeding for 7 days. "You!" Raul's voice cut through the clatter of plates and the sizzle of bacon. He jabbed a thick finger at Maria, his mustache twitching. "Outside, now." The customers, truckers, night shift nurses, a couple of hungover college kids, glanced up, then back to their meals. No one cared. Maria set the coffee pot down, her hands trembling, and followed Raul out into the biting dawn air. The strip mall was waking up, neon signs buzzing to life, but the world felt smaller, sharper, as if it were closing in. "What's this I hear about you feeding a damn mutt?" Raul's breath steamed in the cold, his eyes narrowing. "Some lady said it's been hanging around all week. Said it's scaring her kids." Maria's throat tightened. She'd seen Sol that morning, curled up by the dumpster, his eyes catching the first light like they held secrets. She'd tossed him a half-eaten quesadilla, her heart twisting at how he'd wolfed it down. "It's just scraps," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Stuff we'd throw out anyway." "Scraps?" Raul's laugh was a bark. "You think I'm running a soup kitchen? That dog's a liability. One bite and we're sued. You want to pay for that, Maria?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. Her mind was on Diego, her son, who'd be waking up soon in their cramped one-bedroom apartment, his sketchbook open on the kitchen table. His latest drawing, a vivid pencil sketch of their neighborhood, all sharp angles and hidden beauty, had earned praise from his art teacher. The classes cost $200 a month, a fortune on her $14 an hour wage, but they were Diego's dream, his way out of this life. Losing this job wasn't an option. "Get rid of it," Raul said, his voice low and final. "Or you're done. I mean it." He turned back to the diner, the bell jangling as the door swung shut. Maria stood alone in the parking lot, the cold seeping through her thin sneakers. Sewell was nowhere in sight, but she could still see his tracks in the dust, faint claw marks leading to the dumpster. Her chest ached, not just for the dog, but for herself, for the endless grind of saying yes to men like Raul, of scraping by while the world kept taking. She wiped her eyes, straightened her apron, and went back inside. The coffee pot was still warm, the customers still oblivious. She poured, she smiled, she survived. Maria's life had always been about survival. Born in a small town in Jalisco, she'd crossed the border at 16, chasing dreams of a better life. Instead, she'd found dishwashing jobs, then waitressing, then Diego, a miracle born from a brief, reckless love that didn't last. Now, at 38, her hands were calloused, her back ached, and her dreams had narrowed to one, giving Diego a chance she'd never had. His art was her anchor, each sketch a reminder that her sacrifices meant something. But the weight of those sacrifices was crushing her. El Sabor was her third job in 5 years. The first, a taqueria, had closed when the owner skipped town. The second, a burger joint, let her go when she missed a shift to take Diego to the ER for a fever. El Sabor wasn't much. Dingy walls, sticky menus, a jukebox that hadn't worked in years, but it was steady. Raul was a tyrant, but he paid on time, and the tips, though meager, added up. Maria worked the 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. shift, then cleaned houses on weekends. It was enough to cover the $1,200 rent, Diego's classes, and the basics. Rice, beans, secondhand clothes from the thrift store. But there was no cushion, no safety net. One missed paycheck, and they'd be out on the street. Sewell had appeared a week ago, limping into the parking lot like a ghost. He wasn't big, maybe 30 pounds with a mix of shepherd and something scruffier. His fur was matted, his left ear torn, but his eyes were what got her. They weren't just hungry, they were searching, like he was waiting for someone who'd never come. Maria had seen that look before, in her own reflection, in Diego's face when he asked about his dad. She'd started small, tossing him a stale bun after her shift. By day 3, she was saving scraps on purpose. A chicken wing, some mashed potatoes, a slice of ham. She'd named him Sul because he always found the one patch of sunlight by the dumpster, curling up like it was his throne. Feeding him was reckless. She knew it. Raul had a nose for trouble, and the diner's margins were razor thin. But Sul was hers in a way nothing else was. Not the diner, not the apartment, not even Diego, who was growing up too fast. His questions sharper, his silences deeper. Sul didn't ask for anything but food, didn't judge her for the holes in her shoes or the way her hands shook when the bills came. He was a secret, a small rebellion against a life that felt like a cage. That morning, after Raul's warning, Maria worked harder than usual, her smile forced, her movements sharp. The breakfast rush was brutal. Orders shouted, plates clattering, the air thick with grease and coffee. She refilled mugs, cleared tables, ignored the ache in her calves. But her eyes kept drifting to the window, to the parking lot where Saul might be waiting. She told herself she'd stop, that she'd let him go. But the thought of him starving, of those eyes dimming, made her stomach twist. At noon, a regular Mrs. Torres leaned over the counter, her voice low. "Maria, that dog's back. Saw it by the trash. You know Raul's gonna flip." Maria's heart sank. Mrs. Torres was kind, a grandmother who tipped in quarters and always asked about Diego, but she wasn't above gossip. If she'd seen Sol, others had too. Maria nodded, muttering a thanks, and slipped into the kitchen. The cook, Javier, was flipping burgers, his radio blaring banda music. "You okay, Chica?" he asked, not looking up. "Fine," she lied, grabbing a bag of day-old tortillas from the counter. She stuffed it in her apron pocket, her pulse racing. She'd drop it for Sol after her shift, far from the diner where no one would see. Just one more time, she told herself. Then she'd stop. The rest of her shift was a blur. A spilled soda, a rude trucker who stiffed her on the tip, Raul barking at her to move faster. By 2 p.m., her feet screamed and her head throbbed, but she was free. She clocked out, grabbed her purse, and stepped into the parking lot. The sun was high, the asphalt shimmering with heat. Sul was there by the dumpster, his tail giving a weak wag when he saw her. Maria glanced around. No Raul, no customers. Just the hum of traffic and the distant wail of a siren. She knelt, tossing the tortillas to Sul. He lunged for them, his teeth tearing the plastic, his hunger raw and desperate. "I'm sorry, pequeño," she whispered, her voice cracking. "This is it." She stood, brushing dust from her jeans, and turned to leave. That's when she heard it. Raul's voice, sharp as a blade. "Maria!" He was striding across the lot, his face purple with rage. A customer, a middle-aged woman in a floral dress, trailed behind, her arms crossed. "That's the dog," the woman said, pointing at Sol. "It's filthy. Probably has fleas. My kids were scared to get out of the car." Maria's mouth went dry. Sol froze, a tortilla dangling from his jaws, then bolted behind the dumpster. Raul rounded on Maria, his eyes blazing. "You lied to me," he said. "I told you to get rid of it." "I didn't," Maria started, but Raul cut her off. "Save it. You're done." He reached into his pocket, pulled out an envelope, and shoved it at her. "Your last check. Get out." The world tilted. Maria took the envelope, her fingers numb. $187.43 she'd find out later. Barely enough for a week's groceries. The woman huffed, satisfied, and walked back to her car. Raul didn't look at Maria as he stormed back to the diner, the bell jangling like a death knell. Maria stood there, the envelope trembling in her hand. Sul peeked out from behind the dumpster, his eyes locked on hers. She wanted to scream, to throw the check at Raoul's back, to tell him what it felt like to choose between food and rent, between a dog's life and her son's future. But she didn't. She never did. She turned and walked, her sneakers scuffing the asphalt, until she reached the curb. She sank down, the concrete cold against her thighs, and let the tears come. Diego's face filled her mind, his quiet smile when he showed her his sketches, his pride when his teacher pinned one to the classroom wall. The art classes were his escape, his chance to be more than another kid from the barrio. Now, without her job, they were gone. Rent was due in 2 weeks. The fridge was nearly empty. She pressed her hands to her face, her sobs muffled, and tried to breathe. The world didn't care. It never had. Maria didn't know how long she sat there, the sun climbing higher, the parking lot filling with cars. The diner's bell rang faintly, a cruel reminder of the life she'd lost. Her apron was still tied around her waist, the tortilla bag crumpled in her pocket. She felt exposed, like the city itself was watching her break. A shadow fell over her. She looked up, wiping her face, and saw a man standing there, his silhouette sharp against the sun. He was tall, maybe 50, with graying hair and a face that looked both polished and worn, like a stone smoothed by years of water. His navy suit was crisp, his shoes gleaming, but his hands fidgeted with an empty leash, the leather worn and frayed. "Excuse me," he said, his voice smooth but edged with urgency. "Have you seen a dog around here? Brown, scruffy, about this big?" He held his hands a foot apart, his eyes scanning the lot. Maria blinked, her mind slow to catch up. "Sol," she said, the name slipping out before she could stop it. "Yeah, he's been here. I fed him a few times." The man's face lit up, but there was something else in it. Grief, raw and unguarded. "Sol," he repeated, as if tasting the word. "That's a good name. He's been missing a week. Belonged to my parents before they passed." Maria nodded, unsure what to say. The man crouched beside her, his cologne sharp against the diner's lingering grease. "I'm Victor," he said. "Victor Reyes. If you see him again, please call me." He handed her a business card, thick and embossed with gold. Reyes Investments, CEO. It felt heavy, out of place in her calloused hands. "I'm Maria," she said, her voice hoarse. "But I don't work here anymore. Got fired for feeding your dog." Victor's eyes widened, then softened. "I'm sorry," he said, and it sounded like he meant it. "That's not right." She shrugged, the weight of the day pressing harder. "It's done." Before Victor could say more, a yelp cut through the air. Across the lot, Sewell darted from behind a car, his legs a blur. A teenager, one of the dishwasher's friends, was chasing him with a broom, laughing like it was a game. Maria was on her feet in an instant, her voice raw. "Leave him alone!" Victor followed, his polished shoes pounding the asphalt, the leash swinging in his hand. They reached the edge of the lot where Sewell had backed against a chain-link fence, his hackles up, his eyes wild. The teenager backed off, muttering something about just messing around, and disappeared into the diner. Maria knelt, her breath ragged. "It's okay, Sewell," she said, her voice soft. The dog's ears twitched, but he didn't move. Victor crouched beside her, his suit jacket brushing the dirt. "Hey, buddy," he said, his voice breaking. "It's me." Sewell's tail gave a tentative wag. He crept forward, nose low, until he reached Victor's outstretched hand. Victor's fingers shook as he clipped the leash on, his breath hitching. "Good boy," he whispered, and Maria saw tears in his eyes. She stood, brushing gravel from her knees, her own throat tight. She should have been angry, at Raoul, at the teenager, at Victor for bringing this dog into her life. But all she felt was hollow, like the fight had drained out of her. Victor rose, dusting off his suit, and looked at her. "You're the reason he's still alive," he said. "I don't know how to thank you." "Just take care of him," Maria said, her voice flat. She turned to leave, the envelope still clutched in her hand, but Victor stopped her. "Wait," he said. He reached into his jacket, pulling out a checkbook. Maria's stomach twisted. She didn't want pity, didn't want to be his charity case. But Victor was already writing, his pen moving with purpose. He tore out the check and pressed it into her hand. For you and your son, he said. Maria glanced down. $3 million. The zeros swam in her vision, her breath catching. This can't be real, she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. It's real, Victor said, his eyes steady but shadowed. My parents loved that dog. They'd want this. Maria's knees buckled. She clutched the check, her mind racing. Diego's classes, a new apartment, college, a life where she didn't wake up counting pennies. But something felt wrong, too perfect, like a fairy tale she didn't trust. She looked at Victor, searching his face for a catch. His expression was unreadable, a mix of relief and something darker, something he wasn't saying. Thank you, she managed, her voice cracking. Victor nodded, then turned, leading Sol toward a sleek black car parked across the lot. Maria watched them go, the check burning in her hand, her heart pounding with hope and fear. She didn't notice the man in the gray sedan across the street, his phone pressed to his ear, his eyes fixed on her. Maria walked home, the check folded in her purse, her steps mechanical. The city buzzed around her, cars honking, street vendors shouting, the air thick with smog and tamale steam. But she felt detached, like she was watching herself from above. The check was a lifeline, a miracle, but it didn't erase the sting of Raul's words, the humiliation of being cast out. She'd been fired for kindness, for a dog she'd never see again, and yet that kindness had brought her this, a sum so vast it felt like a dream. Her apartment was on the third floor of a crumbling building, the stairwell smelling of mildew and burnt rice. She unlocked the door, the familiar creak grounding her. The place was small. A sagging couch, a table covered in Diego's sketches, a kitchenette with a leaking faucet. She sank onto the couch, the check in her lap, and stared at it. $3 million. She could pay off her debts, move somewhere safe, give Diego the world. But the weight of it scared her. Money like that didn't come without strings. She thought of Diego, who'd be home from school soon, his backpack heavy with books and dreams. He was 12, gangly and quiet, with her dark eyes and a talent that made her heart ache. His latest sketch, taped to the fridge, was of her hands, calloused, lined, but strong, holding a coffee mug like it was a lifeline. He'd drawn it during one of her shifts, watching her from a corner booth. The memory brought fresh tears, and she pressed the check to her chest as if it could hold her together. The clock ticked toward 3 p.m. Diego would be home any minute, his questions sharp and relentless. She couldn't tell him yet, not until she knew the check was real, not until she understood what Victor's gift meant. She tucked it into a drawer under a stack of bills and started dinner. Rice and beans, the last of their groceries. The routine was a comfort, a reminder that she was still Maria, still a mother, still fighting. When Diego burst through the door, his sneakers squeaking, she forced a smile. Hey, mijo, she said, stirring the pot. How was school? He dropped his backpack, his eyes searching her face. You okay, Ma? You look weird. I'm fine, she said too quickly. Just tired. He didn't push, but he watched her as he grabbed a soda from the fridge. I saw that dog again, he said, casual but curious. By the diner, some guy in a fancy car picked him up. Maria's heart skipped. Yeah, she said, keeping her voice steady. Good for him. Diego nodded, already pulling out his sketchbook. He didn't know about the firing, the check, the man who'd changed everything. Maria watched him draw, his pencil moving with purpose, and felt a surge of love so fierce it hurt. She'd do anything for him, anything. As the sun set, painting the apartment in shades of orange, Maria stood at the window, the city sprawling below. The check was a promise, a way out. But as she looked out, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was looking back. The text came at 2:17 a.m., a single line that turned Maria's world to ice. We know about the money. Give it back or your kid pays. Her phone glowed in the dark, the words searing into her eyes as she sat on the floor of her apartment. Diego's sketch of Sol crumpled in her fist. The East Los Angeles night was alive outside. Sirens wailing, dogs barking, the low thrum of a neighbor's TV. But inside, it was just her, the check, and the threat. She dialed Victor's number, her hands shaking, but it went straight to voicemail. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Call me back." The silence that followed was louder than the city. Maria hadn't slept since the diner, since Raul fired her for feeding Saul, since Victor handed her a check for $3 million. The money was still unreal, locked in a bank vault until it cleared, a promise she couldn't touch. She'd sent Diego to her sister's in San Bernardino, his backpack stuffed with clothes and his sketchbook, his eyes full of questions she couldn't answer. "Just a few days, mijo," she'd said, hugging him too tight. Now, alone, she felt the walls closing in, the check's weight heavier than ever. She stood, her legs unsteady, and paced the tiny apartment. The kitchen table was cluttered with unpaid bills, rent, electricity, Diego's art classes. The check could erase them all, could buy a new life, but the text had turned it into a trap. "We know." Who were they? Victor's competitors, he'd said, vague and nervous when she'd mentioned the man in the gray sedan. She'd seen him again that morning, parked outside her building, his face hidden behind tinted windows. Her stomach churned. She'd been a nobody, a cashier, a single mom, invisible. Now she was a target. The phone buzzed again. Another text, same number. "You have 48 hours. Don't try to run." Maria's breath caught, a sob escaping before she could stop it. She sank to the couch, the springs creaking under her weight, and clutched Diego's sketch. The pencil lines of Saul's fur blurred through her tears. She'd fed that dog out of kindness, a small act to feel human in a world that ground her down. Now it had cost her everything, her job, her safety, maybe her son. Maria's first instinct was to call the police, but the thought died fast. Cops in her neighborhood didn't care about texts from unknown numbers, especially not for a woman like her. She'd seen how they treated her neighbors, dismissive, suspicious, always assuming guilt. And what could she say? That a millionaire gave her $3 million for feeding his dog? That someone was threatening her over money she didn't even have yet? They'd laugh or worse, ask questions she couldn't answer. Victor's warning echoed in her head. "Lay low, don't tell anyone." She was alone. By dawn, her eyes burned, her body heavy with exhaustion. She made coffee, the familiar ritual a thin thread of normalcy. The apartment felt smaller, the air thick with fear. She checked her phone. No reply from Victor. She called again, then sent a text. "Someone's threatening me. Please help." Nothing. The silence was a betrayal, his business card mocking her from the table. Reyes Investments, CEO. She'd trusted him, believed his story about his parents, his gratitude. Now she wondered if he'd known this would happen, if the check was bait. At 8 a.m., she called the bank. The manager, Mr. Patel, answered, his voice cautious. "Mrs. Alvarez, the check is still under review. These amounts, they take time, perhaps tomorrow." "Is it real?" she asked, her voice raw. "It's legitimate, he said. But there was a pause, a hesitation that made her skin crawl. "We've confirmed the account, but I must warn you, large sums attract attention. Be careful." She hung up, her heart pounding. Attention. That's what she'd felt in the parking lot, in the sedan's shadow, in the text's cold precision. She needed answers, and Victor was her only lead. She grabbed her purse, tucked the business card inside, and headed out. The stairwell smelled of stale beer, the walls tagged with fresh graffiti. Outside, the morning was gray, the air heavy with smog. She scanned the street. No sedan, no watcher. But the feeling lingered, a prickle on her neck. Victor's office was downtown, a 40-minute bus ride she couldn't afford but took anyway. The building was a glass tower, its sleek lines a world away from her crumbling apartment. The lobby was all marble and quiet, the receptionist's smile polite but sharp. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked, eyeing Maria's worn jeans and faded hoodie. "No," Maria said, clutching the business card. "But Victor Reyes gave me this. I need to see him. It's urgent." The receptionist's eyes flicked to the card, then back to Maria. "Mr. Reyes is in meetings all day. I can take a message." "Please," Maria said, her voice breaking. "He knows me. It's about his dog." The word felt absurd in this sterile place, but it worked. The receptionist's expression softened and she picked up the phone. After a murmured conversation, she said, "His assistant will see you." Fifth floor. The elevator hummed, each floor a reminder of how out of place Maria was. The fifth floor opened to a hallway lined with glass offices, men and women in suits moving with purpose. A young man in a crisp shirt met her, his handshake firm. "I'm Daniel, Mr. Reyes' assistant. He's unavailable, but I understand you have a concern." Maria hesitated. Daniel's face was kind, but his eyes were guarded, like he was measuring her. "I need to talk to Victor," she said. "He gave me a check. Now someone's threatening me because of it." Daniel's smile faltered. "Threatening you? Can you elaborate?" She showed him the texts, her hands trembling. His face didn't change, but his fingers tightened on the phone. "This is serious," he said. "I'll inform Mr. Reyes immediately. Can you stay? We may need more details." "I can't," Maria said. I just need him to call me, please." Daniel nodded, handing her a card with his direct line. "We'll handle this. Go home. Stay safe. Don't engage with anyone about the check." She left, the card burning in her pocket, Daniel's words ringing hollow. "We'll handle this." But they hadn't seen the sedan, hadn't felt the weight of those texts. On the bus home, she kept her head down, her purse clutched tight. The city blurred past, billboards, palm trees, faces she didn't trust. She was halfway home when her phone buzzed. Not Victor, not Daniel, but another text. "You went to his office. Bad move. 24 hours now." Maria's breath stopped. They were watching her, closer than she'd thought. She scanned the bus, her heart racing. An old man reading a newspaper, a teenager with earbuds, a woman scrolling her phone. Any of them could be the threat. She got off 2 stops early, her legs carrying her through alleys and side streets, her mind screaming to hide. By the time she reached her building, she was shaking, her key scraping the lock. Inside, she bolted the door, her back pressed against it. The apartment was too quiet, Diego's absence a wound. She pulled out his sketch, tracing Saul's face, and let herself cry. She'd been a fool to think the money was hers, to believe kindness could rewrite her life. Now it was a curse, and Diego was the price. That afternoon, Victor finally called. His voice was strained, like he hadn't slept either. "Maria, I got your messages. I'm sorry. I didn't think." "Who's following me?" She cut in, her voice sharp. "They know about the check. They're threatening Diego." A long pause. "I don't know," he said, but it sounded like a lie. "My business, it's complicated. I have enemies, old partners, rivals. The check was impulsive. I wanted to help, but I didn't consider the fallout." "Fallout?" Maria's laugh was bitter. "They're going to hurt my son." "They won't," Victor said too quickly. "I'm handling it. I've got people looking into it, security, contacts. Just stay put. The check will clear tomorrow. Once it does, take the money and leave. Start over somewhere safe." "Leave?" Maria's voice rose. "This is my home. Diego's school, his classes." "I know," Victor said, "but you're not safe here. Not now." She wanted to scream, to tell him to take his money back, to undo the moment she'd fed Saul. But she couldn't. The money was Diego's future, her only leverage. "What about the man in the sedan?" she asked. "Dark jacket, gray car, who is he?" Victor hesitated. "I don't know yet, but I'll find out. Stay inside, Maria. I'll call you tonight." He hung up, leaving her with nothing but fear. She checked the locks, drew the curtains, and sat with her phone, the texts glaring back. 24 hours. She didn't know what they wanted. Money she didn't have, answers she couldn't give. She thought of Diego, safe for now with her sister, but for how long? Her sister's place wasn't a fortress, just a small house in a rough neighborhood. If they'd found Maria, they could find him. Night fell, the city's pulse louder through the thin walls. Maria didn't eat, didn't sleep. She sat on the couch, Diego's sketch in her lap, her phone beside her. At 10 p.m., a knock jolted her. She froze, her heart in her throat. Another knock, sharper. She crept to the door, peering through the peephole. It was Javier, the diner's cook, his face tired but worried. "Maria, you okay?" He called, his voice muffled. "Heard what happened. Raul's a bastard. She opened the door a crack, chain still on. I'm fine, she lied. What do you want? Javier shifted, holding a plastic bag. Brought you some food. Tamales from my mom. You didn't look good yesterday. Her eyes stung. Javier was kind, always slipping her extra coffee during shifts. But she didn't trust kindness now. Thanks, she said, taking the bag through the gap. I'm just dealing with stuff. He nodded, his eyes searching hers. You need anything, you call me, okay? She nodded, closing the door, the tamales' warmth a small comfort. But as she sat, the knock replayed in her mind. What if it hadn't been Javier? What if they came next? She checked her phone. No word from Victor. The deadline was ticking closer, each minute a blade. At midnight, her phone buzzed. Not a text, but a call, the number unknown. She answered, her voice barely a whisper. Hello? A man's voice, low and cold. You're out of time, Maria. We want the money. All of it. I don't have it, she said, her voice shaking. It's not cleared yet. Then get it, he said. Or we find your boy. San Bernardino's not far. The line went dead. Maria's scream was silent, her body curling in on itself. She dialed Victor again, then Daniel, then her sister, her fingers fumbling. No one answered. The apartment spun, the walls too close, the city too loud. She clutched Diego's sketch, her nails tearing the paper, and realized the miracle she'd prayed for was a lie. The money wasn't hers, it never had been.